My father spent 16 years in the Air Force, and his stories instilled in me a love for flying. And so today I want to tell you about one of the most famous pilots ever born, Jackie Cochran. Jackie was, I first learned about Jackie from the pages of a novel, actually. It was called Silver Wings in Santiago Blue. It was written in 1984 by Janet Daly. And so Jackie was like one of the most famous pilots ever. And so today I want to tell you, I did more research about her because I was so fascinated by her. And so today I want to tell you about some of her achievements in the air. And I also want to tell you about what I consider her most important contribution to the field of aviation. So let's begin. In a 2011 article on the website by the National Aviation Hall of Fame called Jackie Cochran Record Setter, I learned that Jackie earned her pilot's license in 1932 after 3 weeks of training. 3 weeks of training. 2 days later, she was flying solo in a borrowed plane to Canada. Didn't even know how to read air maps or use a compass at that point. She learned how to do that along the way. And then in 1935, she entered her first Bendix race, which is a cross-country race from Los Angeles to Cleveland, Ohio. And she didn't win that year, but in 1937, she did take the women's division and finished third overall. In the process, she became the first pilot to do first woman to do a blind landing. In 1938, she won her first Bendix, and in the process of so doing, she was the first woman to win the Bendix, and she was the first pilot, male or female, to finish the course nonstop. And in a minute, I'll tell you about her years during World War II, but after the war, in 1953, she was the first woman to break the sound barrier. And in 1964, at the age of 60, she was the first woman to break Mach 2. So now that I've told you about some of her achievements in the air, let me tell you what I consider her most important contribution to aviation, and that was her contributions to the Air Force, to the Army Air Corps. According to an article in 2013 article by Kayla Jo Finley on the DoDLive.com website, which is owned by the Department of Defense, I learned that Jackie approached General Hap Arnold with the Army Air Corps with the idea of training women to fly non-combat missions in order to free up men to fly combat. But in 1939, the U.S. wasn't at war yet, so the General and the Department of Defense very firmly and very politely said, no thank you. So Jackie, undaunted, took 24 other women pilots and went to Britain to fly with the Air Transport Auxiliary and to learn ferrying aircraft and to learn vital information about their operation, because they were doing basically the same thing already. So in 1942, when the U.S. did enter the war, the General revisited the idea of a women's flying detachment, decided it wasn't such a bad idea after all. He set Jackie up as the head of the WFDS, the Women's Flying Training Detachment. But unbeknownst to Jackie, he also set another female aviator, Nancy Harkness Love, up as the head of the WAFs, the Women's Auxiliary Flying Squadron. But in 1943, both of the groups merged and became the WASPs, the Women's Air Force Women's Air Force Service Pilots. Service pilots, sorry. Jackie always fought very hard to get the WASPs recognized as full military, but unfortunately she didn't realize that. Until 1977, Jimmy Carter was the one who gave them full veteran status. But she was also always a vocal supporter of making the Army Air Corps its own separate branch of the Air Force, the United States Air Force. So in conclusion, Jackie was way ahead of her time. She forced society to reevaluate its ideas of what a woman can achieve. She had enormous contributions in the air, and she gave herself selflessly to the United States Army Air Corps and blazed the trail for women in the Air Force. and she was determined to make something of herself. And in her words from her autobiography, Jackie Cochran, an autobiography, co-written with Nancy Putnam Brindley, I took inspiration from her words. And that is, I may have been born in a hovel, but I am determined to fly with the wind and the stars. Thank you.